Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep. What's up, crew? Welcome back to the Deep Ends. I'm here with one of my good friends. He's kind of a big deal. I would say you're like on the line. You're almost famous.
Thank you.
You're
like a wish.com.
Was that a compliment?
It's like you're almost cool, honestly.
Compliment.
You're kind of, if you didn't try so hard, you'd be cool.
You belong in Nashville, dude, based on how you're dressed. You're dressed for the best here in Nashville. But this is Cody Jefferson. It's hard to put you in I can't put you in a box.
It's a small box.
You just do a lot of things. You're a great dad, a great husband. You're speaking all over the world. We both have grown up in the mega church world. We're going to talk about that today. And this is one of those rare shows where I don't have an agenda.
Yeah.
We're just going to talk about, hopefully, the off-limits subject that nobody really talks about.
Let's go.
So thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
What you told me beforehand, what you want to be known for being a
good steward.
Good steward.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That at the end of this life, there's a conversation to be had about a life well lived and well intentioned. Mm-hmm. Did I lead myself well? Did I steward the responsibility that has been placed on me well? As much the failure as the success. Was I who I said I was? Was I present to the people in front of me? Did I make the most of the opportunity that was given? We read that in Matthew, right? I think one of the greater trepidations of my life would be that I would be wasteful with the opportunity. So that would be what I'd want to be known for. That when my boys grow up and they come to me and I say, you can be anything that you want to be, like anything, that they wouldn't look at me and say, well, then why didn't you? That they would say, of course, we've watched you. And yours is similar, right? Because yours is like no limits, no constraints. That's what you want to be known for? Freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they're tangent.
How do you reconcile that with your own failure and me and you have an interesting past.
Yeah.
Where I was literally born into the megachurch, born into it. Louisiana, Denny Duran, Assemblies of God. Then we moved to the Life Church in Memphis, which is one of the founding churches of ARC. Then James River, Gateway, all.
Oh, you're in.
My uncle is New Life Colorado, Desperation Bands.
Yeah.
So to me, this was all normal.
Sure.
Church was what we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then once I started getting and people can find my story, but I was on staff at all these churches, and I was just like, bro, this is not freedom.
Yeah.
This is, and it's not every church. This is not judgment on church necessarily. But me and my wife, when we got married, we kind of made a decision that this isn't how we necessarily want to live the rest of our lives. Sort of the stewardship thing you're talking about. And I started to pursue freedom elsewhere. You're deeply acquainted with the megachurch. How do you reconcile this idea of stewardship with what you see from how God's people are stewarding their life and their time and their resources?
That's a really loaded question.
We're going off the deep end now, bro.
Yeah, and I also want to be...
Say their names.
What? I'm not here to call anybody out, but I actually did bring a list.
Reveal their secret sin.
Yeah, you know what? I want to be mindful because I think still in the spirit of charismatic evangelicalism.
What is that? People, I don't think know what that means.
Oh, okay. So, I'm from Tulsa, which is kind of the hub of where charismatic evangelicalism kind of really blew up. So you have Rhema, you have ORU, you have Victory Church. And so really ORU and Rhema pushed out with Billy Graham, this whole, Carlton Pearson, Higher Dimensions, in the late 90s, early 2000s. Charismatic, obviously, full of the Spirit. and then evangelical pressing out more in a seeker-friendly fashion. I think where the hard reconciliation for me comes from is you have the party that is church, but we've kind of lost a lot of the discipleship side of things. Mm-hmm. And so you bring people in, and every week you're creating a larger than life experience. The problem is that we then equate that faith with like an experience or with high emotionalism. And so if I don't feel a certain way, if I don't interact a certain way, if I don't pray hard enough, then I don't believe enough. And so God doesn't show up in the same ways that we thought he was. So what happens when God is silent? We don't really lean into that as much. What happens in the midst of failure? Like, we don't lean into that a ton. Everything is fairly prosperity driven, kind of name it, claim it, believe it and receive it, which I think, or I believe, having been in that world for over a decade professionally, it just creates a real disconnect from the trauma and tragedy of real life. So we don't know how to steward. When we talk about stewardship, we don't know how to steward trauma, tragedy, and failure well. We know how to mask it. We know how to pray around it. We know how to, in some ways, superficially cast it out. But if we don't process it, if we don't transform it, we just end up transmitting it. And so that's also, I think, why we see a lot of sensationalism and over-the-top theatrics in the modern church, because we're really trying to mask that we don't actually have everything together. But so long as we have the fanfare of people looking at us and parading around, you're not going to ask questions.
So there's a lot that you just said. Wow. First of all, you said we transmit it.
Yeah.
The transmission is basically passing it along.
Right.
So we're scattering it.
Right. Well, because we don't process generational trauma, generational curses, and we can talk curses all day long. We don't process these things. We don't lean into the transformation of those. We hide them, we mask them, we pray over them. And then what happens is we then create this sensationalistic ideology around faith that we pass on to our kids, which is why I believe so many kids of charismatic evangelical megachurch pastors end up deconstructing, because they go out into the world and recognize, hold on, this doesn't actually hold weight.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't process well. Why didn't you ever teach me what it means to fail well and to fail through things?
Dude, we posted a short a couple of weeks ago on more people would meet Jesus if it weren't for Christians.
Sure.
And I was just like, basically, Christians are stupid. And, you know, it's Jake taking something and making me look completely insane. Yeah. Posting it, which works. That's like how you... And then, dude, dozens and dozens of comments who just reinforce the point. Yeah. Who are basically like, bro, read the New Testament. Jesus doesn't care about you making money. It's not about this. It's not... Like, man, what kind of message does it pass along when your life is completely a wreck and you're trying to lead other people to join you in your dysfunction as a person? What you're talking about is people get into the real life and they realize, oh, man, well, hold on. Other people have a better system, a better theology than the church does. And so I'm just going to go after that. Yeah. And there doesn't seem to be many people who are like bridging the gap between that, because me and you are business owners. Right. You know, we were like, you want to talk about discipleship? Study business. Sure. Business owners are better disciplers than most pastors. Well,
and typically better stewards.
So we have to.
More appropriate in our stewardship. But there's a responsibility and there's an oversight to it. Yeah. I think one of the harder parts around the church is, again, we start to give people authority and put them on pedestals that they were never meant to stand on. And the problem with charismatic leadership is charisma and talent can open doors that God never called anyone to walk through. And so what I have learned is there's a real discernment that has to happen. specifically now where everything can be sensational, you can go viral and get famous, and you can obtain authority that you're not seasoned,
pseudo authority,
you're not called to.
Yeah.
And so we have, a blind leading the blind,
So what would you, let's go back to what you said earlier, where you have, you have bad stewardship and dysfunction. Have you met with a lot of people who are kind of like, I would call them like de-churched, where they were in church and then they left?
Sure.
How do you talk to those people?
The same way I would talk to anyone, because the church does a really great job of seeing people. And we're a culture that settles for being seen, but we're desperate to be known. And so I find when you can sit with people with, as Richard Rohr would say, nothing to prove, hide, or protect. Like, do I care what you believe? Sure, because it's going to influence our relationship. It's going to influence your eternity. That's my belief system. But because you've had something pressed on you for so long, I'm not here to press anything on you. I don't have anything to prove to you. I know what the fruit and evidence is in my own life, and I know how I've failed through things. And if we want to talk failure, right, like my life is littered with failure, but the beauty in that is it all points back to grace. Like, I'm good. I'm not that good.
You look
God
good.
is. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. If this doesn't work out, again, just need to breathe. Call me. I got the vibe down. So I find when you can just sit with people and you can sit with them in their pain, you can sit with them in their trauma, you can sit with them in their frustration, you can sit with them in their disbelief. And the church is really quick to have answers and pretty solutions. Sometimes there aren't any. And sometimes silence is the solution. And sometimes suffering is the solution. And sometimes that is the only path. And one of the things that I love about the story of Jesus is that he wasn't afraid to sit in that pain. And there wasn't a quick, fast solution. There wasn't pray this and everything's going to be fine. I feel like true success isn't that you get everything that you've always wanted that's on your vision board. It's how well can you suffer and still maintain a hope in the promise that God has for you. That in the midst of any storm, like, God is still with you. You may not feel him. You may not see him. It may not be made evident in the manifestation of all the things that you thought you wanted. But there's a really particular grace that's seasoned and sanctified in the midst of your suffering.
You use a lot of church world words like lingo.
Thank you.
Sanctification.
Yeah.
No, that's not a compliment. We're going to get there.
Okay.
Ideology, sanctification,
Yeah.
Charismatic. What did you say? Charismatic.
Evangelicalism,
blah, 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 blah. Boring.
It's boring to people who don't understand what I'm talking about.
I understand what you're talking about, but what does it mean to be in a storm and be seasoned and have grace? Like, what does that even mean?
Sure. It means that in the midst of your life falling apart, in the midst of a storm, meaning life feels and looks like chaos. And some of this you created, some of this maybe you didn't. In the midst of all of that, can you still sit and say, I don't understand it. I don't know where this is going. I actually don't know how I'm going to even get through this. Tears in my eyes, sweating, in pain, frustrated. God, you're still good. And you're still worthy of my praise, even though I don't even have a song for you right now.
How many of those seasons have you gone through? A lot?
Many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you just came out of one, if I'm not mistaken.
I've been in many. I think my life is, for whatever reason, some of this is brought on by myself, by trauma that I hadn't confronted, that I didn't really even know existed, which is why I believe some sense of self-actualization or therapy is useful, more so than just going to church on Sunday and praying or reading the word. I believe those are foundational habits that you should adhere to if you call yourself a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
But being able to find qualified help to walk with you through situations that you don't necessarily comprehend is incredibly useful. To help you steward that pain well.
100%. How many businesses do you own now?
Solely? Or that I'm a part of?
Partnered in, part of?
6.
Nice. Are you growing or are you capped at the moment?
So I just took on another endeavor, Spiritual World Tour, which is an apparel company.
Yeah.
And now between that and growing our mastermind, like I'm not taking any more cap positions, like any table positions.
Yeah.
I need to stabilize where I'm at right now and make sure that I steward that really well, which means all that means is that I'm responsible with it to the best of my ability.
Being a good steward.
Being a good steward. Ba-bow. Yeah.
Full circle, baby.
So stabilizing that right now. And then we'll see, like, how's my margin? Who do I need to hire? What is it going to look like in more of a COO position to take over operations for a company that doesn't really have operations right now? What's that team going to need to look like? What kind of, time and energy is that going to require from me while I maintain the boundaries around my family and my own spiritual life to not compromise those things? Once we stabilize that, may take on more.
How will you know when you're ready?
How do you ever know when you're ready? I believe when I can look at my schedule, look at our teams, there's consistency, there's healthy culture, we have positive, upside, and my schedule maintains its integrity.
Do you run your schedule like pretty?
Yeah,
like a clock.
You have to, especially with kids as they get older.
Yeah,
like there's no way around that. When you want to be as involved as I am, and not everybody wants that, or I think we want that, but our schedule doesn't reflect it. So I believe your schedule reflects your values. So for me, like I'm done at 3:30 every day, which means that pickups at 4, and then we have practice every single night or games or tournaments. So that means that my whole day needs to be fairly regimented and on point for me to be able to accomplish all the things that I need to accomplish on a daily basis and confirm that I am who I say I am. Yeah.
I tell people, if your budget or your calendar do not agree with you, it means you are a liar.
Yeah.
Because people say stuff, talk is so cheap. But if your money's not going there and your time's not going there, it means you're just lying.
Yeah.
You're just a liar.
And I think one of the hardest things to overcome is when you know you're lying to yourself and you have to maintain a facade that is real.
Yeah.
And you find yourself out of integrity. And it's why I always tell leaders, young or seasoned, don't get in over your skis and talking about things you're not actually accomplishing yet. Because what you do is you remove the ability for wise counsel.
You mean like marketing?
Like marketing.
Don't be a marketer.
You remove the ability to be able to receive help from people because you can't actually let people know where you're really at because you've created a construct of where you want people to believe that you are.
Who do you think is doing that right now online?
That would be a list too long.
I am going to pull you there at some point. Because right now you're like, dude, you look really pretty.
Thank you.
You're like really well put together.
Thank you.
I told Dan this. I said, bro, you know the problem with you right now?
Tell me.
He was like, what?
Diagnose me.
No, this is Dan. This is to Dan. You just hung out with him. He was just in Nashville.
Yeah.
I said, you remember what I said? So you're too likable, bro. So annoying. You're too likable. So you're pretty likable, dude. Like,
thanks. I would say you're pretty likable.
Well, but I'll open up. I mean, I think.
Who do you think's in over their skis right now?
Online?
Sure.
John Lindell.
Yeah.
I think that.
I mean, no, you can run that up the poll if you want.
I think
talk about it.
It was. Can we call Mark real fast? Driscoll.
Yeah.
I think that I'm less connected than you are. You're very connected dude,
that's funny because I thought you knew. I would assume you're more connected.
I ignore them all. I don't like them. Like
anyone in the church, period.
I tend to actually, so church, business, all of the above. My personality is, dude, I love people, but I don't like them.
Okay.
There's like a few but I'm pretty hardcore introvert. So
really,
it's a big deal for me. Like this week.
So are you just like a charismatic introvert?
Yeah. How would you describe me?
Or like an ambivert, like you can be on when you need to be on, but you retreat to recharge?
On all personality. So I'm an Enneagram 8.
Oh, that makes sense. I'm a 3.
Okay. So that explains a lot.
Yeah.
About me and you.
100%.
But that's also why we get along.
Yeah. My wife's an 8.
I'm an INTJ.
ENFJ.
Okay. So now that I and the E.
Yeah.
And you're a feeler, I'm a thinker.
Yep.
I am on the culture index, I'm an enterpriser.
Okay.
So my sociability is lower. So on all of the profiles, I use charisma just as a tool. Mm-hmm. So my ability to be social is really just mechanism. I need that to like communicate, but I don't need, it's not part of my
What's ideal for you? Like what brings you joy? Like your ideal life? Like
oh dude, like sitting and reading books, building new things, playing piano. I play all the time. Mm-hmm. If I'm feeling rough and I go sit down and play piano, it changes. In fact, I do these walk and talks now with God where I'll walk and I'll pray.
Sure.
And there was a prophetess who came out to our house a couple of years ago and she started praying over this house because this house is newer. You know, when you move on a new piece of land and you talk about generational curses and things like, you know, there's crazy stuff.
You want to clear it.
Yeah. So she said, I was praying and I saw this vision of your house and there were all of these angels around your house, but there was a wall of fire around your house and it didn't have a limit on the top of it. So it was going all the way up to the heavens. And so everywhere else there was a cloud, but your house was piercing through that cloud. And so I was actually on a walk years after that. This was probably 3 or 4 months ago. And I was feeling very, very uptight. Like I was in a spiritual type of warfare because, you know, we'll patch into that and we'll feel like something's going on. There's an assignment against something. Mm-hmm. So I was praying. I was like, for whatever reason, I just was like, give the angels that are around our house a song to sing. And Holy Spirit said, they've been waiting on you. So what does that mean? He said, well, they're not writing songs. That's why you had to have the Levites. That's why you have to have worship leaders. That's why we're the creators. Mm-hmm. Angels are not. And so I got this picture of like, we're waiting. They want to sing what you're singing. And I've gotten all these prophetic words pushing me back to like the days of my past when I was a writer and a songwriter and a worship leader. And so for me, music is actually like a furnace. It can actually deal with spiritual warfare that you don't even realize is happening. Mm-hmm. So you asked what I like to do, what's ideal for me. I love to play. I love to sing. I love to write. I love to read. I love building business. But most of the things that I really enjoy are more like, I like smaller groups and I'll connect with you. We can hang out all day. But when it gets to like a lot of people, you can ask Jake. I tend to just kind of like observe and sit back and watch because I don't have that natural outgoing social component.
Interesting. I would say that so long as I understand the room, we're good. Like going on like Broadway at 10 p.m. in Nash, get me out of. It's the worst experience. I don't like crowds of people that I don't know.
Give you anxiety?
Massive anxiety.
Yeah. Were you wearing your hat?
Oh yeah, it was a real showstopper. Thanks, Gage at 3 Horses. Quick plug.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and of course I wear that. I usually have a hat on because I'm growing my hair long and it's kind of squirrely right now. It's in that weird phase, you know.
Yeah.
Like in between, where you just look moon faced all the time because it's not long enough to be cool. It's like Jonathan Taylor Thomas, Home Improvement 95.
You just have to get over the hump.
I just got to get it. Listen, man. Yeah, but I'm 5'6", so a hump to you is a mountain to me.
That's true. What did you say? You're a cheetah and I'm a bear.
That's it.
They're spirit animals.
Yeah, I'm more like a rabid squirrel, I think. It's like always going quick.
Yeah.
But I would say I'm more apt to be in a small room because I think we can go deeper and we get more context and we can create more effectively. I feel like in large rooms, specifically like large conference, because you just spoke at WealthCon, like you're more talking at people and you're presenting and you don't know anyone's context. And that's always been a frustration for me, even in the church, like traveling and speaking, big conferences. It's like, where are you going after? What are you doing after this? Like, what's the accountability after this? Like, you got the dopamine rush, you feel good, you came down, you broke your Tupac CDs, you're ready. But then you go back and like the whole family is still in, the Biggie Tupac feud and you're still in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So where do you go from there? I like smaller rooms because it feels like we can actually develop relationship and create, and there could be accountability on the backside.
What do you think about, so you sounds like you were professionally, like you were paid to go speak at churches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What do you think
about
that?
Were you?
No, I was paid to go play.
Well, I was paid to play as well.
Yeah.
Like music's a big part of my life. And I would say that the same, but I would still consider myself, you said I used to be a songwriter, which is interesting to me because then you say, I love to just sit down and write. So you're still a songwriter.
Yeah.
Why is it I was?
So like actually writing, I don't do as much writing anymore.
Do you do more composing?
I'm getting back into it. Yeah, composing, playing.
Yeah.
And just playing keyboard. Not actually, because being a songwriter is like you're actually creating stuff that's never existed before.
Yeah.
I don't do as much of that right now, except for on the musical side, but not on the lyrical side or the singing or all of that. So it's coming full circle. It's working its way back into what I do.
Is that something you want to do more of?
Yes, 100%. I just have to relearn how to do it.
Should we start a band?
Yeah, sure. Let's start a band.
Okay.
What do you want to call it?
That's what I was going to ask you. Here to Breathe?
Yeah. Mountain Song.
Mountain Song?
Hillsong is old, man.
I think they're getting away from that anyway.
They are changing the name?
I think there's going to be like United.
Really? Nice.
Perhaps.
So you were in all of the, like, so the reason I say you're more connected is because you're friends with Mark, Carl, who's the guy at Transformation?
Mike.
Yeah. You're friends with all them.
Mm-hmm. But we're all Tulsa guys, right? So like Mike and I were youth pastors together, and then he took over right when I was making my exit from occupational ministry. He was taking over for his parents and for Bishop McIntosh. And so they were passing the baton to him when I was making my transition into the business world.
When was that?
2015, I think. Somewhere
so we've been in business about the same time.
Yeah.
10 years. Yeah. Up on 10 years.
You've built, I would say you've built far more like on paper impressive things. I think that probably, I've focused more on the relational side.
Yeah.
So I think we've built in two different ways. And so, but I also think that comes back to our personalities.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to John and Mark. What do you think about that whole, like, is he just selling books? But for the record, we're talking about Mark Driscoll.
Yeah.
And John.
I don't think it has anything to do. I don't think anything in the moment had anything to do with selling books. I think it was a really great stepping stone into like his positioning right now. But, Pastor Driscoll or Mark has been, all of his content front facing lately has been very much about, I think what he would position as like biblical gender roles and traditional gender roles and the ideologies around that. And obviously far more conservative than most church leaders today. So I'm just trying to be mindful of how I word this because I want to be respectful to those people as well, because I know that they feel that God has a call in their life to speak into a more liberal-leaning ideology.
Who is that?
Who isn't it?
Liberal-leaning?
That's the whole modern church of being gender-affirming, of anything kind of goes. Jesus is your best friend.
Wait, really?
You don't see that?
No.
Interesting.
I don't know. I guess I'm not tapped into those churches who are gender
everything
affirming.
Everything is so, especially front-facing online and sound clips, right, and sound bites. Everyone is so afraid of being canceled, and everyone is so afraid of losing eyeballs and attention that it's like the modern church has perfected the art of saying nothing. And so when you have something to say, just like my most viral content is me speaking about the detriment of OnlyFans to women. Speaking about the detriments, the very psychological detriment of porn to men. But it's so normalized in culture that it gets a lot of pushback. Yeah. And so when Mark comes out and reprimands and speaks out against something that happens at a conference, right? A man dancing on a pole swallowing swords, which is just I don't know who was on the board that thought that was a good idea to begin with. Like, hey, let's just have a dude strip down and ride a pole. Like, that sounds masculine.
At a men's conference.
At a men's conference. Hey guys, what's the worst that could happen? Right?
Yeah.
So is that the pole of prosperity? What is it?
That would be cool, actually.
Yeah.
Just come up and get money from it.
Okay, so now we're even reverting further back to the pole in the first place.
Go, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
Are we going to throw our money on that altar? Because
but it's for a good cause.
Is it?
Yeah, it's instead of donating to, a stripper, you're donating to missions or something.
Interesting.
Let's spin it.
Spinning this, Listen, I saw that and none of it made sense to me. But again, there's a lot in the church I think we do for sensationalism. I mean, even last year, TC, so the church, Transformation Church, last year they created a ton of heat for their Easter service, right? Because they were talking twerking on stage and a lot of imagery that didn't necessarily have a proper fit.
Yeah.
But in context, most of the people that attend are seekers. I think one of the hard parts about megachurch and being seeker friendly is at what point does the church become the original intention of we come together, we sharpen iron, we pray, we find respite or we find rest in equipping to then go out and then we're the church. So we're the ones who are seeking others who don't know the gospel, and we're showcasing that faith through our lifestyle. What was it? It was 1995, I think it was. DC Talk came out with Jesus Freak album. Maybe it was 94, 95. And right before
later than that. It was later than 95.
No, I don't think it was, because I think I was in 5th grade. It was 95 or 96, because I had that album at Summit Camp, which is the camp I went to in 6th grade. 95?
Whoa, you were right, dude.
Well, listen.
Here's the Jesus Freak.
Here's the deal, man.
November 21st, 1995.
Yeah. So there's a line in there. I want to say it's Kevin Max. I don't actually know who says it. It's right before the song, What If I Stumble? Okay. I don't know how I remember all of this, but I spun that CD until it had so many scratches that I couldn't, because we couldn't afford the non-skip portable CD players. So it says, the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today are Christians who acknowledge Jesus by their lips and deny him by their lifestyle. That's what an unbelieving world finds unbelievable.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, as and large, charismatic, seeker-friendly churches are trying to be, when you don't see the fruit on the backside of a transformed life, we're just a clanging gong.
Yeah. On that note, I do think one of my biggest issues is not the theatrical nature of megachurches. It's the propensity to judge from other Christians. I think we're the most dramatic group of people in the history of the world.
But I also think that that's because we're trying to reconcile our own humanity.
I don't think so. I think that that's because we think that we are better than we are. Just because you have the ability to, it's like when you read the Bible, you see most of the time, you see Jesus's disciples, this happens over and over. They're like, let's fight this person. And Jesus is like, shut up and settle down. You see the sons of thunder trying to go fight. He's like, you can't use God to curse people who don't know God. You see Jesus telling a parable of like how you've got a plank in your eye and you're calling on a speck in another. And I just think the judginess of Christians is disgusting.
But I also think that we're saying the same thing. Because trying to reconcile your humanity against a belief and an ideology that in and of itself leads you to believe that you're chosen creates, if you're not mature in that faith, an ideology of superiority.
Got it. Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
We're talking very heady right now.
You use words that are just like, nobody knows what they mean.
From a marketing perspective, I understand what you're saying.
Well, I'm a marketer. So
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to talk like a third grader.
Theology is inherently stupid. It's flawed at the basic level.
I don't know that it's stupid.
That would be a marketing word. You
Yeah,
wouldn't use the word stupid.
I think that's an irresponsible word.
You would use the word like theology is theology is too clinically sophisticated for and you would use other big words. You're like Jordan Peterson.
Well, I thank you.
What do you think? Do you agree?
I can see both sides of the equation. The shock factor gets the usefulness, but there's like accuracy, like both of them. I can see both sides.
Here's why. Let me back that up.
There's academic and there's relatability.
Correct.
Right. And so for me, having been in a world of academic theology for 13 years, you develop a vernacular or a way of speaking that just becomes the modality that you articulate or that you speak through. So even now I'm having to think through, well, how would I say this if I wasn't trying to speak like I speak?
You remind me of, in this particular lane of theology, you remind me of the CDC.
Okay.
Because you can hide in the vernacular and you can hide in the statistical variations of what different words mean. And when we bring it really close to home, most theology doesn't make any sense.
I wouldn't disagree with you in that.
So then how do we bring that down so that us mere mortals can understand it?
God is love.
That actually is basically everything.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you can do it. You can do it.
Okay, let's take this mic off. We're done. So
I think to back up my position that theology is stupid, and I'm saying it multiple times, which means I've thought, if anytime I say something more than once, means I've thought a lot about it, and so I've probably got some firepower to back it up. The ability that we have to understand meaning is severely limited.
Sure.
Because, this like my truth, your truth, all of this dumb. Right. But what we're really arguing over, not me and you, but people, is we're arguing over this word means a particular thing to me.
Right.
Because of my experience.
Cultural appropriation.
We'll never be able to agree on the theology if we don't agree on the meaning of the words behind it.
Sure.
And Jesus knew this, and so he was constantly just confusing everyone.
Right.
But he wasn't it wasn't for the purpose of confusion. It was because the people that were in power, they had different meanings attached to different words, different phrases.
Well, this is why I said I came to confound the wise and speak plainly to children.
Yeah.
Sure.
100%.
Yeah. Well, and I think that most theological banter is fodder. I mean, it's non-essentialism and it's mental masturbation. It's a way to feel or sound superior instead of being confronted with the truth that, like, you really don't know. Like, we only believe this to be true because we believe it to be true. Like, we're standing on a book written by men organized in, the 3rd century at the Nicene Convention. Like, what if it is all speculation? What if it's not true? But what if it is? I think that we can spend a whole lot of time debating semantics and debating theological positions and talking about things that are non-essential, that don't necessarily matter, which is why we have so many denominations. But at the end of the day, I think we're trying to say the same thing, which is there's a mystery wrapped around all of this that we don't actually understand. And so we try to contextualize it with words and with phrases to try and put something that is intangible into a tangible form. And you can't.
You know what I think it means when your life is hard, like yours has been, above everything else?
What?
That God trusts you.
I would say that even as the psalmist said, which could have been David, like, where can I go that your spirit's not there?
It was definitely David, dude.
I mean,
he literally says his name in a lot of the Psalms.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm not disagreeing with you. But where can I go? Like, if top of the mountain, make my bed in shale or make my bed in hell. Like, I'm not proposing that I'm anything like David, because David was a pre-frame to Jesus.
That is also partially true and partially false.
What isn't?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
It's all inference, and it's all appropriation, and it's all in how we choose to read and adopt things.
I hate that frame, but keep going. We have to get there at some point, like,
get where?
To the point where we like,
because we're doing the very thing that you say that all of us do.
No, totally not.
Maybe you're not, or maybe you don't believe that you are.
Neither one of us are.
Okay.
No. Anyways, I interrupted you, and I'm sorry. Keep going on the David thing. David,
there's just
maybe he's real, maybe he's not. What he said.
There's just never been a time in my life where I didn't acknowledge God's grace and presence in my life. Even when I couldn't feel it, even when I wanted to curse him and run away. I've ran away many times. I've tried to disprove this, and it's not actually that difficult on a logical level to find holes and to create gaps. But for some reason, God's hand has always been on my life. And I think it's actually taken 40 years to accept that. Because I 100% ran away from that. Whether that be shame, guilt, unworthiness, confusion, not understanding why. Because I don't feel particularly special in any way. But for some reason, God has continued to use me even when I didn't want to be used. Even in my own wandering and frustration, like, there was still a grace in there, and it was still part of the story that got me here. Does that make sense?
It does. You could also say that, well, maybe it's not God. Maybe it's just, you just refuse to die. So you keep going.
Sure.
You should dig deeper on that, because I think it's actually very hard to find holes in the gospel. I think it's actually incredibly difficult for anyone to intellectually disconnect historical fact from the Old Testament.
Based on what, though?
Based on his history. Based on the.
But how do you know that history is what it is? Outside of the books that we have.
Oh, are we going there?
And the things that people say. Like, how do we know? How do you know?
Like, how we're revisionist history with
No, I'm like, this is genuine. Like, how do you reconcile all of that?
Gaps in history?
Or that we just take everything that people write at face value? Measured against what?
So this opens up a can of worms, because if
I think we got to where we're trying to go.
history, I don't think that humans really figured out. So like, let's take 2 examples real fast.
Let's do it.
Let's take Nazi Germany and the Third Reich.
Okay.
And let's take the 3,000-year Egyptian reign.
Okay.
Both of them operated similarly in that they really only recorded their victories,
mm-hmm.
not their losses.
Mm-hmm.
But when they say history is written by the victors, you have to, this is how I deal with that. You have to triple and quadruple source different things. So like certain things will line up, certain things will be contradictory. And there's a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would love it. It basically goes through any like cross-references, historical texts. And the Old Testament is one of the most validated source materials of history.
Sure.
Because you have writings in the Egyptian scrolls about it. You have writings from the Greeks and the Romans, and everything tends to mm-hmm. substantiate at some level certain pieces of the Bible. And if you can get to 70%, you have to make a judgment call on, do you just accept the 30% that can't be substantiated, or do you not? Mm-hmm. So I think that historically, like, we're never going to be at 100%.
Sure.
But we can get close enough to where it's like, just, you're going to have to just accept the other 20%.
Yeah.
Even with World War II and Nazi Germany and Big Pharma and how all this stuff came over to America, we still have enough source material to like validate and invalidate certain things.
Yeah.
But so the question of like, how do we know that anything is true? That takes us into like holographic universe, which is like, have you studied holographic?
No, enlighten me.
Nothing's real.
Sure.
Like nothing.
Right.
At that point. So, but there's not a lot of utility. So mm-hmm. this goes back to like levels of energy.
Right.
Do you know where you calibrate on levels of energy?
I do not. How would one figure that out for our listeners?
Study. You would have to do kinesiology and muscle testing and kind of go. You probably run 300.
Yeah.
300 to.
Is that good? What's an ideal number?
There's no good or bad.
What are you?
350 to 400.
Okay.
Dan's like 550.
Wow.
Dan's really high.
Do you want to be higher?
You can be higher, but sometimes there's no point in being higher. So the levels of energy is different form.
What if you want to win?
It's the power source. So if you want to win, you need to be at like 175 to 250.
Interesting.
You actually
want to lower it.
Huh?
You want to lower it.
Yeah, because it's almost like a bell curve.
Okay.
So at the bottom end, you have like 125 and sub 100, or like really low.
Do they have any examples of who that would be?
Yeah, let me explain it to you. So like sex rates at like 275.
Okay.
But people who are obsessed with sex mm-hmm. are 125. So it's your state and how that state affects your energy level. Pride, courage, these things that are required for competition mm-hmm. rate lower than when you get into the higher levels. You kind of don't really care about it. And so there is some utility sometimes in staying in the middle. You have the low end, which is like, there's no achievement at the low end because you don't believe in yourself. You think everyone's out to get you. There's also not that much achievement on the high end because they don't care.
Interesting.
There's like,
so like almost like nihilistic.
Huh?
Like nihilistic, like nothing matters?
No, more like oneness.
Okay.
And nothing really matters because it's more like the timelines of like a 700 are so long. They're like thousands of years. The timelines of like the 200s are like 3 to 5 years. That's where the realm of achievement kind of happens. Mm-hmm. Like 3 to 5 years, you're going to set 3-year targets and hit them. The timelines of like a 125 and below are like 60 minutes.
Interesting.
So the how far you can see is correlated to your levels of energy. So I don't think there's any better or worse. I mean, dude, sub 100 is like hostile to life.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be in that place. That's where apathy and all the anxiety comes from there. But certain rooms or geographic locations, principalities have, it's like the scientific story of Jesus is basically taking people and taking them up the levels of energy. They get to this place where they have eternity in mind. It's like level 1000. There's no timelines anymore. And so certain principalities are connected to certain levels of energy. So what did Micah say? Is Ishtar pornography?
I don't remember the name of it.
So yeah, there's
all over the U.S.
There's different principalities like Moloch, Mammon. America's like, dude, riddled with Mammon like a cancer through the body, which is greed. It's the Canaanite god of money. Moloch is abortion. It's like child sacrifice. I think it's Ishtar. That's sexual sin and pornography and sex trafficking. So these all have different levels of energy that are attached to them, and they're all hostile. So
and you're appropriating them to
science.
Like a deity, though.
Yes, because that's
like, is that just a way to contextually frame it?
It's like the
to put it in a category.
Yeah,
it's spiritual.
It's the only way we can
hierarchy.
Scientifically attach meaning to spiritual principles.
Yeah.
So, like, let's take acceptance.
Okay.
Which is, I think, 380 or 400, somewhere around there. And so when you get into quantum science and quantum mechanics, a lot of these guys are teaching, like Dr. David Hawkins, who came up with it. It's better for you to expect and accept than it is for you to desire, because desire is like 180.
Okay.
And so when you desire something, the only thing that is actually healthy to desire that doesn't rob you as it gives you. So like the only thing we can use desire for profitably is Jesus. Because if we desire Jesus, we're acknowledging that we lack enough of Jesus. And that's actually the only fruitful example of desire found. Everything else, it's never fruitful to lack.
Interesting.
And desire brings with it the connotation that you lack it. Whereas expectation is you don't lack it, you're accepting it.
Yeah.
So that's why the Bible is so full of these things of like, don't doubt, faith, expectation. So it's really cool how it's just a scientific explanation to sort of understand these spiritual principles. And the higher you go, the less you care about right now.
Interesting.
You're just kind of like in a different. I don't remember what we were talking about. What were we talking about?
I don't know, but that's interesting. And so they have tests for this?
Yeah. You can put tests now with nodes on your brain that will rate you, but you can also test it with muscle testing. And so your body, so your meridian pathways that carry energy through your body will lock up at certain energy levels. So if I go and touch you, there are areas that your body will, like if I have unhealthy tendencies, your body will actually just lock up. So you have, like, they call it, in Eastern medicine, they call it like chi.
Yeah, sure.
And so that lake is in the middle, and your extremities and your hands and your feet. And so you have these different places where they do acupuncture usually is where your chi meridian pathway points are. That's what acupuncture is actually developed based on forcing the pathways open so that your energy can make it through the meridian pathways. And so kinesiology is the study of how energy transfers and transitions through the body. So if you're exposed, like I was just in Vegas and we stayed at Caesar's Palace and it was a great event, but I'm like, I'm the same way. I don't like going out there.
It's an energy.
It's an energy for it. And so what you'll notice is like, you will actually test it next time you're out there. You can't lift as heavy in the gym. You feel a little bit weaker.
Yeah.
You maybe are a little more tired.
I just want to stay in my room. Just
by going into a place. And what's happening spiritually is one thing, but what's happening scientifically is our body is sensing a kind of a vibration that we don't really jive with. And so it's just actually locking up certain energy pathways. And so the resources you can access in your body are lower.
So my wife is incredibly intuitive
Yeah.
to people. Is that kind of part of this? Like a heightened sensitivity to, because I find a lot of women are like, a lot of our wives are this way. We would all, like, a lot of us would say, oh, my wife is highly intuitive. She can just read people really well. Whereas if
Is it intuition or discernment?
Right, I don't know.
So intuition is like an energy sensation.
Mm-hmm.
Discernment is a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
So,
I would actually probably say it's more on the discernment side then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, then it kind of bypasses a little bit of this because she's getting actual discernment comes from like a spiritual gift that you have.
Yeah.
And so you can discern the spirits, you can discern what's going on in different places. Whereas intuition, because a lot of women are way more intuitive than men.
Right.
Intuition is more of an energy, and like they're more tapped into collective consciousness than men are, and that would fall into levels of energy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to do some research on this.
Frederick Dodson has a great book on this called Levels of Energy.
Okay.
It's maps of consciousness put into a new thing, but this is interesting. So have you ever been able to tell when someone has like just a lot of transactional, like they just have an agenda with you?
Taker energy.
Yeah. That's 125.
Okay.
So people above that tend to be like, it's like you're way above that because you're always, how can I support you? What do you need? If you get anything, it's as a derivative of you offering service or value. Mm-hmm. It's never for you to take something. So this guy, Frederick Dodson, I'll read you some things that are like pretty incredible. This is his book, Levels of Energy. He's only about 2% of the readers of this book will actually be chronic 125s. The chances of lower energies reading this book to begin with is close to zero because these teachings are not perceivable to them. The first chapters of the book are deliberately written in lower state, 190 to 350, because I cannot accurately describe the lower levels without lowering my own vibration. So have you gone into an event and you can just feel these people are like,
sure. And
so you have to lower yourself down to meet them. Mm-hmm. What you're doing is you're lowering your vibration down.
So this is why even in speaking, you notice this. We've not shared a ton of stages together. I'm always reading the room. That's why when we
shared one and you made fun of me your whole speech.
I did not make fun of you, dude. You are literally the second best looking guy in the room.
There it is.
Yeah, no.
That's what he did.
What event was this?
It was
in Florida somewhere.
Yeah,
okay. It was
a powerhouse event.
He said, if I vibrated too high, writing this book would be of no interest to me. So that's him being on the top end.
Oh, right? That makes sense.
That's awesome.
That makes sense.
That makes
so
so
he's like,
sense.
I have to be in my middle. Like I've got to be. As the book progresses, I will progress with it. I deliberately changed the locations while writing in order to stay true to the vibe and properly convey each section. The first section of the book was written in Varkala, South India. The second in Germany. The third was written in Queenstown, New Zealand. All three areas are amazing and beautiful. Yet the first vibrates at 270, the second at 370, and the third at 470. In order to address certain readers and realities properly, one has to level with them. I could not have transmitted levels 600 to 1000 if I were not at least in the 470. And I could not have transmitted 0 to 200 if I were not at least below 300.
Yeah.
So he's going in different locations. This explains why certain places like Vegas or Tulsa or Nashville or Miami, they all feel different.
Which is also why, again, going back to the speaking, typically I'm reading the energy of the room. And if I'm coming, because I'll usually close, and recognizing that at the end of a conference, people actually aren't energized because all they've been doing is receiving tactical information, which I would assume is probably lower.
Tactical is low.
And so I have to come in low, connect emotionally there, and then I build up to then send out.
Yep.
That is so interesting.
Check this out. It's going to blow your minds. This is the last.
I didn't realize that there was a formula to what I'm doing that is like
Yeah.
I understand the energy side of things, but I didn't understand this side of it.
This is where the whole thing breaks open. How do you feel when someone smiles at you? Just you answer that real fast.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, it depends on what kind of smile. If you smile at me and bite your lip, it's going to feel different to me.
Yeah, that's true.
Got it.
He says, how do you feel when someone smiles at you? How much is a smile worth? At 125 and below, you will reject it and ignore it. Here's why. Because to accept it means realizing that happiness is free, and that would ruin your whole game.
Yeah, you'd have to be wrong. Yeah.
Nobody would.
So it sounds like in those lower levels, there's such a preservation of ego.
Yeah. It is not desire that is the path to achievement, but willingness, which is 350. So I said 380, I think, and I was off. Wanting achieves nothing. It only affirms lack. The moment you desire something, you're creating a void within yourself. This is why the only healthy thing to want is Jesus, because it's the only context in where creating a void creates filling. In any other context, creating a void creates a void.
Yeah.
Instead of developing a longing for something, you should develop a feeling of willingness to have it, or an expectation or appreciation of it. Instead of saying, I want it, you say, I like it.
Well, so this is also where the energy of like manifesting, because you're
already have
creating
it.
and you're
speaking. Manifesting, you already have it.
Right. It just hasn't materialized yet.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, this is a great book, dude. I think you would.
But that's also where the concept of praying miracles into existence.
Yeah, but even that, the miracle, Jesus didn't say. Jesus talked very clearly about, like, I think my favorite part of God talking about miracles was the mustard seed. And if you really look at where miracles show up, they tend to show up where there's an expectation for the miracle, not where there's a need for the miracle. So this is why I say all the time, God doesn't respond to your need, he responds to your faith. And so, again, God is the one that built maps of consciousness. He didn't call it that. God's the one that built Newtonian science. He didn't call it that. God's the one that built quantum mechanics. He didn't call it that. Science is explicitly and only the uncovering of how God's rules work. That's what science is.
Yeah.
And so maps of consciousness is just a form of science that explains everything Jesus was already saying. So I'm like, if we just read the Bible and actually believe it, we get everything that's in it.
Right.
So that's why Jesus was so impressed with the Roman centurion who was like, you don't even need to come to my house. Just say it. Why was that impressive to Jesus? And we have this like podunk translation of the Bible that's not even real most of the time. It wasn't just because he was subjugated to authority. It was because he had the expectation that didn't even require Jesus to be there.
Right.
So his faith was so strong.
Well, it's like the woman with the issue of blood who I just want to touch his garment.
Yeah.
I don't even need him to touch me.
Yeah. So that calibrates that acceptance and expectation.
And so then I would position then that I am where I am, or that God's hand has always been like there's something on me, because I've always accepted that God always has a plan. I might not understand it, but there's always a faith wrapped around it. And I believe because of the things that I've walked through, and even the ways in which I was raised with less than most, that there was a very real acknowledgement of the miraculous that most would write off as mundane. And so when you can see the miracle in everything, then everything becomes possible.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you're a better man than I, to have never lost faith.
I've run away from it, but I've never been able to run away from the belief that God is real.
Are you surprised sometimes that God chose you?
Every day.
So you would be like more of a, I know that you made a joke about this. You're like, I'm not saying that I'm like David, but you would be more like David. Because
even in the midst of my own humanity and recognizing that sometimes I choose your own adventure. Sometimes I choose hell, right? Because it feels normal.
Yeah.
Because it's appropriate to your ways of thinking and the ways in which you were raised or whatever.
Yeah.
Always coming back to God.
Yeah.
Right? Like even recognizing, man, even in the midst of that, and I chose that, there was a lesson here. And I'm grateful for your grace. Like that was a misstep.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it and I'm going to learn from it. And hopefully in the midst of that, this is where parenting becomes so interesting to me, because it's now we take all of this and transform it. And so then we inform our children in a way in which that creates what we believe is a healthier posture and position towards faith. But we're also in the midst of that removing some of the confrontation that we walked through. And it's like, but did that create this? So am I removing some of the obstacle and the frustration and the wandering because I've leaned into the reconciliation, all of that in my own life? Am I removing that from them? Do they need to walk through that?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Can we talk about David real fast? Do we have time? Okay.
Talk about David.
Well, I saw this pastor one time speak in front of a group of people about how King David was a foreshadowing of Jesus, blah, 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 and you're not David.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw him strip the power from the entire room.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the only point of the Old Testament is some pop-up book that God has created for his dumb kids, there is not a lot of power in those stories. Mm-hmm. So when you said that you were like, I'm not saying that I'm David because David was just a foreshadowing of Jesus.
Not just a foreshadow. I don't want to minimize the impact of the story. I also just want to be very mindful of trying to create a posture and a position that relates me to a biblical giant.
Why?
I think it's healthy to approach life with a sense of humility. And
you think that's arrogant?
In ways, right? In ways. But I also think that there are ways in which we could both probably say that we're like Noah, building things that haven't been constructed before, being written off. And it's only like the day after it starts writing that people are like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense.
So in Romans 8,
we are now more than conquerors. Yeah.
I'm going to read two translations for you.
Are you going to read the NLT?
Do you like that one?
I do. More than the NIV.
Do you like the Passion? People think I'm a heathen for quoting Passion.
I don't know that it's probably akin to the Message.
They just want me to read from New King James.
Oh, I'm not that guy. I grew up that way. I grew up Baptist.
Do you know the story of the King James translator?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes, I don't read it.
We won't go there. For all creation is waiting eagerly for the future day when God will reveal who his children are. Then it connects. Against its will, all creation is subjected to God's curse, but with eager hope, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join with God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. Passion Translation says, the entire universe is standing on tiptoe, yearning to see the unveiling of God's glorious sons and daughters. So is he talking about us? Sons and daughters? Or is he talking about dead men and women in the Old Testament who are spiritual giants?
Or is he talking about all?
We would have to be included in that.
Sure.
So I don't actually think it's arrogant for you to David wasn't a spiritual giant before he was proved to be a spiritual giant.
Sure.
How did that process look like? Well, people almost killed him his whole life. And I don't see the theological soundness of looking at the whole Old Testament and saying, well, they were different.
Sure.
I think it's actually reversed. I think that's the problem with Western Christianity and with church today is people think that they're weak and they're supposed to be poor and they're supposed to live in bondage. And we're all just like hanging out waiting for this dumb rapture to happen. And so therefore we have no responsibility and we do nothing because we have a misaligned expectation of what these stories actually carry for us. So I would say you are like a spiritual giant.
Yeah. But so also on the flip side of that, thank you. I received that. I would also say, or like my consideration is that also in Western Christianity, we've taken the ideology of rich and gone way too far in terms of what we believe God desires for us. And we almost make it a spectacle. Like, God wants to bless you by paying off your car. God wants to bless you by giving you more to steward over. It's like, if you haven't been responsible with what you have, why would he give you more? Like we pray, and I just see this in the like mega church as a prosperity, probably like name it, claim it churches.
Which calibrates at 125.
Right. And so, because if it won't preach around the world, I have a hard time with it. Like, I think we're blessed to live where we do. But the idea that because I desire these things,
which is broken, as we discussed, yes,
that God somehow is a genie that commands all of that. Like, if I go to Nigeria, what's on those kids' vision boards? They get more than a dirt cake to eat. Their mom doesn't die of malaria or AIDS. They clean water that they've never seen. I don't have dysentery today. I just think we can be really irresponsible with the idea of rich, which is why I actually think that what you're doing, this is not where we're going, but with rich and wealthy being two very different things, because I think that not just the church, because I think that that's just an assuming statement. I think there are a lot of Christians or a lot of people who would call themselves Christians that don't really understand what it means to follow Jesus, misappropriate those words. And I think that creates a lot of pain and frustration and disbelief in people, that because your life looks a certain way, or your social status looks a certain way, or you posture in a certain way, that God somehow loves you more. Can't get behind that.
Well, that's a false ideology.
100%, which is why rich and wealthy are two very different things.
However, the key to focus on is probably not rich, it's probably provision.
Sure.
And then generosity would be like wrapped up in that as well.
Well, but this is also why, someone, I posted a reel that was just like cheeky. My son was, he kind of gives me a hard time because I say God's still in the miracle business all the time. And so like he got an upgrade to a room. He's like, God's still in the miracle business. And you get all these comments of like, this is what a miracle is. How do you reconcile that against kids dying? And I'm like, well, I hear you there, but I can also tell you over the past 7 years, the number of girls we've helped to rescue from trafficking. I can tell you the number of clean water wells that we've been able to provide based on how I've stewarded the responsibility of what I'm called to well. So it's like, I hear you in trying to create some sort of hierarchy of the miraculous, but what are you doing actually to steward well in being rich or wealthy to bear the kingdom now. I think, again, sometimes we take the responsibility off of our own shoulders that we are called to bear the kingdom and that we're called to actually bear the miracle in our own provision and in our own generosity, which I think is irresponsible.
Do you think that those people are experiencing guilt?
I think on some level there has to be a sense of guilt, or at the very least, misunderstanding and assumption.
Yeah. I mean, they're just revealing where they rate, where their level is.
Yeah, because what could you do?
Well, you could do a lot more if you weren't wasting your time
Commenting on in an echo chamber.
So like that would probably be like 50 to 70, which is like extremely low. It says more about them than you.
Oh, 100%. And that's the whole point.
But think about it this way. So does God want you to have a blessed marriage?
Of course.
Are you sure?
It bears fruit.
I agree with you. When you say like, well, there is a principality over a certain state or over a certain country, and marriages are broken. Does that belief that God wants you to have a blessed marriage, does that also preach to that country?
Sure.
Okay. Then money is no different.
I don't disagree with you.
So when you go to Nigeria or you go into Haiti or these places they are extreme poverty, that doesn't invalidate.
No, it speaks more to the principality of the region.
And how do you fight a principality? You don't. We're not supposed to go in and be fighting principalities. You have to structurally change what allowed the principality to be there in the first place. The principality has no power. Principalities aren't creators. They're not going in making their own holes in the walls to climb through.
Yeah.
They're using what's there. The devil gets in where he fits in.
Which is why I say it's our responsibility.
But you can't do that if you're poor.
We're saying the same thing.
I know, but I'm speaking specifically to the people who are going to comment on your short.
Yeah. Well, and they'll comment on yours as well.
They always do because they love to hear themselves think.
Sure.
But being committed, like someone else is experiencing a bad marriage, therefore I no longer believe that God wants me to have a good marriage.
Yeah.
Is the height of stupidity.
Sure.
And that is really like an assignment that the enemy has used through theology to wreck believers from what they are entitled to as sons and daughters. And so it's just a mess.
I agree.
So I think I hate poverty.
But poverty will always exist.
Will it?
People always have a choice.
Yeah, but will it always exist?
That's a good.
So what you just
it's causing me it's causing me.
As a friend, let me say this. You just cursed the world. As a friend, I'm saying that. Not because I think it was your heart, but you say something that I don't think I can find in Scripture. And if you can't find if God didn't say it, we can't say it, even from an intellectual standpoint. And this is me being like, dude, brothers in arms.
Well, sure. But if people have free will, and people choose to stay where they are, then how could it not exist?
That's what Romans is talking about. It's everything stands on the edge of a knife, waiting for the revealing of the sons and daughters. So think about the theological implications. If we believe that there is a heaven that we're going to versus a penetration of heaven here, where is there a point in time where the people of God could have so much influence, not from chasing influence or chasing government positions or any of that dumb stuff, but have so much influence that the world, dude, I'm speaking at these conferences just like you are about business and sales, and people are asking, how do I learn how to pray?
Sure.
Like, how is this happening? It's taking place right now. But if we always believe that something demonic will be there, then I think we resolve ourselves to a lack of responsibility, a lack of spiritual obligation.
See, I consider it the flipped.
How?
That if we always believe that there's going to be a principality of darkness, that it is our responsibility as bearers of light to go and to bear the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. Because to remove that darkness, then we just exist.
You don't remove darkness. Darkness is not a thing.
It's just the absence of light.
Yeah. So like, even this should be deconstructed, because
let's do it.
Darkness is not a thing.
Sure.
There's no thing, substance.
It's just a void.
Okay. So if you think, a principality in and of itself, it is leveraging and manipulating what is already there foundationally. Mm-hmm. If the light is there, the principality can be there, but darkness cannot, which means there's a stripping of power, mm-hmm. because there's nothing to feed it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I believe that poverty will always be there. I think that if we were doing what we were called to do, then it would erode.
I hear you, but I also... I feel like there will always be those who reject it.
Why?
Because that's the whole point of free will. Mm-hmm. And so if there is no rejection at any point, where is the free will in that?
Okay, so if I have...
And hear me, I
hear you.
I love what you're saying.
I hear you.
That kind of reconciliation, mm-hmm. would be the kingdom.
I get it.
On earth.
You hear me. I hear you. You hear me, but you don't agree with me. But here's why.
You gonna tell me why I don't agree with you?
No.
Oh.
Well, I can.
Tell me.
If you want me to. I think that's because of your experience.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be my presuppositional worldview.
That's a big word.
Sorry.
That's not a marketing word.
No, that's a yeah.
In some sense, it's the experience of humanity.
Sure.
Collectively.
Sure.
But I think if Jesus just came to tweak the state of humanity, then he failed. I don't think that's what it was for. Mm-hmm. But if free will, let's talk about that for just a second. Because free will is a big deal. Mm-hmm. But I think we have disagreements on free will.
Please.
If I give you a hot pan right off of a stove, mm-hmm. and it's sizzling, mm-hmm. you have the free will to touch it.
Sure.
Why will you not?
Because I don't want to get burned.
Because you're not stupid.
Right. Because
you have the understanding of how the world works. Mm-hmm. So understanding comes from Holy Spirit. That's insight. Mm-hmm. And insight, wisdom, people call it different things. Just because there's free will does not mean that people sin.
Right, but I also think that's a hard correspondence.
No, it's perfect because
a hot pan has nothing to do with spiritual inference.
No, we're not talking about spiritual inference. We're talking about sin is the equivalent of putting rocks in a gasoline engine. Sin is what corrodes the body and it corrodes the mind. Mm-hmm. There's even if you get back into levels of consciousness, sin is very attractive to lower energy levels. It's not attractive to higher energy levels. And so there's not a lot of utility in sin when you realize what sin is doing to you. So the manuscript of the gospel is essentially the law has been completed, and here is the way that you're designed to live. Here's the way that you're designed to experience life and life to the full. And so sin is the equivalent of touching the hot stove. And I guess to make it a perfect analogy, it would be I'll give you $100 to touch the hot stove, because there is a temporary payoff for sin that feels really good. But the long-term consequence of sin is that you aren't living the way that you're supposed to live, and you lack power and all of the things that come with it. I think free will is one of the most incredible things that God trusted us with. But we fundamentally disagree on this and only this, that there will always be people who take advantage of free will, where I believe that there's a way to collectively get people to a level of energy where they understand what sin is, and therefore they don't want to participate in it frequently or repeatedly.
Yeah, I get that. And I would say that, assumedly, based on my context, who I've walked with, what I've experienced, what those around me have experienced, that there will always be those, because of trauma, because of experience, because of preference, because of comfort, that will reject that level of energy because it is so foreign, and it will always be perceived as a threat. Now, how we eradicate the ideology that that is a threat, that has to be the Holy Spirit. We're not that good. But the Spirit through us, like, there's a hope there in that reconciliation, in that transformation. How we get there, that would be an act of God in a very miraculous way.
God is still in the miracle business.
He is still in the miracle business.
So it sounds like you guys have two sides of the same coin.
We do.
Yeah.
The reality, the belief of utility.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what it seems to be.
The current reality, the future reality.
Correct.
Sure.
would be
Sure.
that. And I do think that, like, so words have power, and so I'm learning to be, like, really careful with my even my reports. So, like, you send 12 people into the promised land, and 10 of them come back and they tell the truth, and 2 of them come back and they tell a different truth. The 10 who are responsible for telling the truth are called evil. And it's not because they did not speak the truth. It's because they reported a data set, a narrative that God did not say. And the 2 that were counted righteous, to an extent, ignored reality and instead aligned with what God had told them. Mm-hmm. And I think that we are in that place today, all of the time, where we have something that is factually true. Mm-hmm. We have something that God has said. Mm-hmm. There is no reconciliation there. There is simply rejection of one and adherence to the other. And part of that, I believe, is because the power of our words. And our words give life or death to different narratives, even. And so I would just say that we actually are really close on this. The only thing that would, the only small, and we do like this, like we come away, then we come back together, right?
Sure.
Like we're
we're
connected, come away a little bit. And the only reason for this right here is I will not speak something, even that is statistically accurate, if I don't believe that it is what God has said.
Sure.
Because then I am actually giving power to something. And I wonder if the reason that there will, quote, always be people who reject it is because the people with spiritual power keep saying that.
That's a good pushback.
And I don't know. I don't think any one of us can know.
Yeah, I've
you know, but I know in my own life, and you have experienced this too. When a situation occurs and I start speaking about the situation, it usually gets worse. Mm-hmm. And when I tend to speak about the promise, not the problem, I want to be those 2, man. Those 2, the Joshua and Caleb were delusional. Like, they were absolutely delusional. Think about it.
Sure.
They come back to, like, we're going to take this land, and the 10 are like, you're crazy. We're going to die. This is the data. This is the fact. We have to make a decision. Are we going to be the minority, the 2 who reject it? and we don't describe the problem, we are obsessed with the promise? Or are we going to be the 10 who are realistic?
But I think you can also be fully focused on the promise while also acknowledging the logic.
It's not logic that we're talking about.
What are we talking about?
We're talking
I'm just
about,
using your language.
Yeah, we're talking about the narrative we adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
And the narrative we reinforce with our words.
The poor will always what?
Huh?
The poor will always be with you. And so acknowledging that there is always going to be, and I don't even know that this has anything to do with financial prosperity or anything else.
Yeah.
Like, there are always going to be those who choose a different path. That doesn't mean that we don't believe in the fullness and the promise of God and the call on our life to bear the kingdom. It's also, in my belief, it's an acknowledgement that even in the midst of rejection, even in the midst of people pursuing their own endeavors, it doesn't influence or change the way that I'm going to adhere to God's call on my life and to bear the kingdom here.
Yeah.
And I also believe that because of people's experiences and coming out on the other side and continuing to bear fruit in what most would call barren soil, to point back to it had to be God, creates the miraculous narrative that unbelieving people can find root in.
What do you think?
It was good, man. It's probably one of the, it's a good episode to hear both sides of the equation when it comes to this project.
What do you think?
I think it's really fun tension that we have because we both have the heart of the kingdom in mind.
Yeah.
And we're both going to the same place.
100%. And we're called to the same thing.
And we're called to the same things. Yeah. But there's a really, again, Richard Rohr would say that, like, when there's nothing to prove, hide, or protect,
yeah,
you can, that's where you find spiritual contentment and peace.
Yeah.
But also because we both have peace with what we believe,
yeah,
we can have this. This would be a really healthy dialogue for the church as a whole and for believers and non-believers, where there is nothing to prove, hide, or protect. I can hear you and I can say, oh, I totally understand why you would say that. I believe this. Can you hear that position as well?
100%.
And there's a respect for both of us to disagree, but we're kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think if people could get past their ego and their pain and their hurt, their frustration, their assumption, their need to be right, their need to posture, more of us would find that we're trying to say the same thing. We're just using different language to get there. And we may, because of our experiences culturally, socioeconomically, spiritual background, pain and trauma, that all informs our worldview and how we see things. And the reason that I believe the things that I believe is because I've seen it manifest in my life and in the people around me. And so your position, I think, because of how your context is, no, this is just what God says. This, and in my mind, because I've buried so many people, I've lost so many people to addiction, to murder, to suicide. I'm like, I hear you. There's also a grace here for the people who will always, in some ways, not always, but for the people who continue to choose this. I want to advocate for this space because I believe God still uses it and reconciles it. I have to believe that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to minimize it.
Yeah.
So,
or disqualify it.
Or disqualify it.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
yeah,
That's good.
Cool. Cody, where can people find you on social?
Onlyfans.com.
yeah. I literally was gonna go there.
I did it for you, bro. I got you.
The easiest place right now is Instagram for sure. It's just Cody Jefferson. I'm easy to find online.
Cool.
Like very easy.
We can put your Instagram in the show notes.
Yeah. Very easy to find.
I love you, dude.
I love you,
It's
man.
gonna be a wild ride.
This is fun. We should do this
yeah.
more.
Dude, anytime.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Tulsa since I was like 11, but
Do you ride horses or Harleys?
I've never ridden a motorcycle in my life.
Okay.
Actually, I would love to though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can put you on.
You have
one.
a couple of them, don't you?
I have a few.
Yeah.
I got a stable.
I would love that. Let's go to Tulsa.
Dude, how fun would that
That'd
be?
be a
Welch
blast.
on a motorcycle.
Hell yeah.
God. We'll just change your whole image.
Dude, talk to Mike. I'll come play keys for the crew.
Let's go.
We'll do.
Listen, man, you don't want to be on that stage.
No.
Those musicians are the most seasoned studio gospel players. They are in the amount of changes they play
He doesn't know.
is. Are you a gospel player?
I grew up in Memphis.
Are we gonna after this? Are you gonna play some?
Probably not.
Okay.
Well, we have to go speak at our event,
We literally we have to roll out.
Yeah, we do.
and
right
I've got
now.
to. You're gonna have to drive
Perfect.
so that I can finish up my notes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I'll just come out to see you. I
Please.
just want to come see you.
Please.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
So thanks for hanging with us, man.
It was a pleasure.
You're
Thanks
a
for
gift.
having me.
You're welcome. All right. See you guys. Love you.